In the cutthroat world of commercial aviation, second chances are rare. A single major failure can be enough to ground an airline for good. But in less than 12 months, Spirit Airlines accomplished the nearly impossible. It failed twice, in spectacular fashion. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe if you want to uncover the truth behind aviation's biggest failures. The first domino fell in November 2024 with a catastrophic Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, a desperate last-ditch effort to keep the engines from flaming out entirely. Following a whirlwind 4-month restructuring, the airline reemerged in March 2025, promising a new beginning. That promise lasted just 5 months. By August, Spirit issued a stunning warning, admitting there was substantial doubt it could survive for another year. It was a staggering 1-2 punch that left the industry, investors, and millions of travelers asking the same question: how did this happen? This wasn't just any airline, this was Spirit, the brash, bright yellow disruptor that pioneered the ultra-low-cost model in America. This was the airline that made it possible to fly across the country for the price of a nice dinner, by unbundling every single part of the travel experience to offer rock-bottom base fares. And for a time, they weren't just successful, they were consistently one of the most profitable airlines in the entire nation. So, how did it all unravel so completely, so fast? How does an airline that revolutionized budget travel find itself fighting for its own survival, not once, but twice within the same year? This isn't a simple story of one bad decision, it's a cascade of critical failures, a perfect storm of bad luck, unfortunate timing, and fatal strategic errors. Join us as we break down the 5 critical failures that led to the historic collapse of Spirit Airlines, from a multi-billion-dollar merger blocked by the government to a crippling flaw in its own fleet, and a business model that its biggest rivals learned to copy and weaponize against it. This is the story of how Spirit flew too close to the sun and how its wings simply melted away. To truly understand the depth of Spirit's fall, you have to appreciate the heights it once reached. For years, the airline thrived on a business model that legacy carriers like Delta, American, and United openly mocked, but secretly feared. Spirit's philosophy was both radical and brilliantly simple: unbundle everything. They stripped the air travel experience down to its absolute barest essence: a seat on a plane that gets you from point A to point B. Anything and everything else was extra. Want to choose your own seat? That'll be a fee. Need to bring a bag for the overhead bin? That's another fee. A bottle of water? A printed boarding pass? You guessed it, fee. The model was relentlessly lampooned in popular culture, and the airline became the butt of jokes for its comically tight seats and an endless menu of charges. But for a massive slice of the American public, the price-sensitive traveler, it was a revolution. Spirit made it possible for families to take vacations they could never otherwise afford, for students to fly home for the holidays, and for small businesses to connect face-to-face. They tapped into a huge, undeserved market that cared about one thing above all else: the final price on the screen. And for a long time, it worked brilliantly. While legacy carriers grappled with bloated operational costs, complex hub-and-spoke networks, and expensive union contracts, Spirit was designed to be lean and hyper-efficient. Its planes spent more hours in the air each day, packed with more seats per plane, and generated streams of cash from dozens of ancillary fees. Their presence created the Spirit effect, an industry term for the way fares on all competing airlines would plummet the moment Spirit announced a new route. They acted as a powerful check on the pricing power of the giants, and for their efforts, they were rewarded with staggering profitability. Their stock soared, and they placed orders for hundreds of new Airbus jets. For a golden era, they were the undisputed kings of ultra-low-cost travel in North America. It seemed like the model was invincible, but beneath the surface, the seeds of its own destruction were already being sown. The very strategies that powered Spirit's meteoric rise would soon become the anchors that dragged it into the abyss. The first and most public of these failures was the loss of a deal that Spirit's leadership saw as its only way out. By early 2022, the landscape of American aviation was shifting. The pandemic had shaken the industry to its core, and Spirit, after years of relentless growth, was facing serious new headwinds. It first sought a merger with its direct rival, Frontier Airlines. But then, a far more tempting offer emerged: a $3.8 billion all-cash buyout from JetBlue Airways. For Spirit's management and stockholders, this was a golden ticket, not just a massive premium on their stock price, but more importantly, a lifeline. A combined JetBlue Spirit would have become the 5th largest airline in the U.S., creating a genuine competitor to the Big Four: American, Delta, United, and Southwest. that control over 80% of the domestic market. The two airlines argued passionately that their union would be pro-consumer. By joining forces, they claimed that they could bring JetBlue's famously lower fares and higher quality service to more cities, creating a credible national challenger to the dominance of the legacy giants. The U.S. Department of Justice saw it very, very differently. In March 2023, the DOJ filed a lawsuit to block the merger on antitrust grounds. Their argument was brutally simple. This deal wasn't about creating a stronger competitor. It was about eliminating the single most disruptive low-cost force in the entire country. The government argued that allowing JetBlue to acquire Spirit would permanently erase the Spirit effect. JetBlue's stated plan was to rip out Spirit's tightly packed bare-bones seats, reconfigure the planes to its own roomier standards, and inevitably raise fares. The result, the DOJ contended, would be billions of dollars in higher ticket prices for the very budget-conscious travelers who depended on Spirit's existence. In January 2024, a federal judge in Boston delivered the final fatal blow, siding entirely with the government. The judge ruled that the merger would substantially lessen competition and violate bedrock antitrust law, noting that the consumers that rely on Spirit's unique low-price model would likely be harmed. For Spirit, the verdict was an unmitigated catastrophe. The merger was its primary public-facing survival strategy. Without it, the airline was left stranded, vulnerable, and facing a mountain of internal problems that were about to boil over. The first domino had fallen. With the JetBlue deal officially dead, the industry spotlight turned directly into Spirit's balance sheet. The picture it revealed was grim. The airline was hemorrhaging cash at an unsustainable rate. Since the beginning of 2020, Spirit had collectively lost more than $2.5 billion. By the end of 2024, its net loss for that year alone was projected to hit a staggering $1.2 billion, more than double the heavy losses from the previous year. This wasn't just a symptom of weak ticket sales, it was a full-blown crisis of costs. The post-pandemic inflationary wave that swept the globe hit the airline industry like a hurricane. Jet fuel prices, one of airlines' largest expenses, became wildly volatile. At the same time, labor costs skyrocketed. Like other carriers, Spirit was forced to sign expensive new contracts with its pilots and flight attendants to maintain operations. This inflationary pressure was an existential threat to Spirit's very identity. The entire ultra-low-cost model is built on maintaining a razor-thin cost advantage over competitors. When your own costs rise dramatically, you have two choices: absorb the losses or raise your fares. Spirit was forced to try both, and neither worked. Raising fares alienated its core customer base, who would simply look elsewhere. Eating the losses only accelerated its financial death spiral. The company's debt load became unbearable, with over $1 billion in payments coming due in 2025. This led directly to the inevitable Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing in November 2024. The plan was to restructure its finances, converting $795 million of debt into new stock and securing fresh financing. But even that radical surgery wasn't enough. The airline emerged from bankruptcy in March 2025, yet the fundamental problems remained unsolved. Despite having projected a return to profitability for the year, Spirit lost another $246 million in the second quarter of 2025 alone, posting a disastrous operating margin of negative 18.1%. Cash reserves plummeted from $902 million at the start of the year to just $407.5 million by mid-year. The company was burning money so fast that its own credit card processor, the company that handles its ticket sales, demanded extra collateral just to continue their agreement. It was a massive vote of no confidence, a clear signal from the financial world that Spirit was on borrowed time. While Spirit was fighting a financial war on the ground, it was simultaneously losing a critical battle over the very machines that kept its planes in the air, their engines. Spirit had long prided itself on operating a young, modern, all-Airbus fleet. This fleet uniformity was a cornerstone of its low-cost strategy, simplifying maintenance, training, and scheduling. But in a stunning twist of fate, this strategic advantage became a catastrophic weakness. The problem centered on the Pratt & Whitney PW1100G geared turbofan engines used on its newer Airbus A320neo aircraft. In July 2023, Pratt & Whitney's parent company revealed a major unforeseen manufacturing defect. A contaminated powdered metal used to forge high-pressure turbine discs meant that hundreds of engines worldwide had to be urgently removed and inspected for potential microscopic cracking. For an airline like Spirit, whose fleet was heavily reliant on the specific aircraft and engine combination, this was a waking nightmare. The recall didn't just affect a few planes, It struck at the heart of its fleet and its growth strategy. Projections show that as many as 67 of Spirit's jets could be grounded at the same time by the end of 2025, a massive unusable chunk of its fleet. To make matters exponentially worse, each engine inspection and repair was taking over 400 days due to global supply chain shortages for parts and labor. Every single day a plane sits on the tarmac, it's a multi-million-dollar asset that generates zero revenue while still incurring costs. The operational impact was devastating. Spirit's daily aircraft utilization, a key productivity metric measuring how many hours a day each plane is flying, dropped by more than 10%. Planes that were designed to be flying 12 hours a day were now parked indefinitely. The airline had no choice but to slash flight schedules, pull out of entire cities, and furlough hundreds of pilots simply because it didn't have enough working aircraft for them to fly. While Spirit received some financial compensation from Pratt & Whitney, it wasn't nearly enough to cover the colossal revenue losses and operational chaos. This engine crisis crippled Spirit's ability to generate cash right when it needed it most, compounding its debt problems and pushing it closer to the edge. For over a decade, Spirit's greatest weapon was its unique and aggressive business model. No one else was as relentless with unbundling fares and charging for every conceivable extra. This gave them a clear, distinct identity in the marketplace. Eventually, legacy carriers decided that if you can't beat them, you should join them by copying Spirit's own strategy. Beginning around 2015, Delta, followed by United and American, began rolling out basic economy fares. The concept was a direct assault on Spirit's territory. Offer a no-frills ticket that competes directly with Spirit on price, but with a crucial difference. It was on a major legacy airline. These tickets came with many of the same restrictions that Spirit passengers knew well. No advanced seat selection, no ticket changes, and often no included carry-on bag. Suddenly, Spirit's primary selling point, being unequivocally the cheapest option, was severely eroded. The traveler searching for a flight might see a Spirit fare for $59, but right next to it, a United Basic Economy fare for $79. For a small premium, that traveler could now fly on a more established airline, earn valuable frequent flyer miles in a global alliance, and enjoy what many perceived to be a more reliable and comfortable experience. This strategic pivot by the legacy carriers changed everything. Spirit was no longer competing in a niche of its own creation. It was now locked in a direct price war with giants that had much, much deeper pockets. The major airlines could afford to use basic economy as a loss leader, a tool to capture the most price-sensitive customers, knowing that they could make up the difference on business travelers, premium cabins, and lucrative international routes. Spirit had no such cushion. Its entire business model lived and died with the economy traveler. The strategy of the Big Four was brutally effective, and they successfully blunted the Spirit effect. Just as Spirit's own costs were rising, its ability to stand out on price was disappearing. The final nail in the coffin was a fundamental and perhaps permanent shift in travelers themselves. The post-pandemic travel boom came with a psychological twist. After years of being cooped up and facing uncertainty, people emerged desperate to travel, but with a new set of priorities. The phenomenon of revenge travel saw consumers increasingly willing to pay a premium for a better, more reliable, and more comfortable journey. This created an explosion in what the industry calls premium leisure travel. Passengers who might have previously opted for the cheapest seat were now splurging on extra legroom, upgraded cabins, and direct flights. Legacy carriers, with their diverse cabin offerings, capitalized on this perfectly. Their premium economy and domestic first-class cabins were suddenly full of leisure travelers, not just business people. This cultural shift left Spirit in an impossibly tough spot. Its entire brand identity was built on the exact opposite idea: endure a little discomfort to get a much lower price. But now the market was actively moving away from that trade-off. Demand for purely domestic, low-cost leisure travel, Spirit's bread and butter, began to weaken significantly, leaving too many seats chasing fewer budget-focused customers. The airline itself admitted in its financial reports that this weak demand was a primary driver of its terrible financial performance. Spirit was caught in a painful paradox. Its traditional price-first customers were being methodically lured away by the legacy carriers' basic economy fares, while the fastest-growing and most profitable segment of the market, premium leisure, was completely inaccessible to them. The airline tried to react, announcing plans late in the game to add more premium-style seating and improve its loyalty program, but it was too little, too late. The company's identity was so deeply ingrained as the bare-bones option that it couldn't pivot. The market had evolved, but Spirit's model, once so powerfully disruptive, was now too rigid to adapt. So there you have it. Not one single, simple failure, but a devastating and interconnected cascade of 5 distinct crises. A blocked merger that snatched away its only perceived lifeline, a mountain of insurmountable debt and soaring costs that made its core business model unsustainable, a critical flaw in its own fleet that grounded its planes when it could least afford it, a brilliant competitive strategy that was copied by its rivals and turned against it, and finally, a fundamental shift in consumer behavior that made its entire value proposition less and less relevant. Spirit's journey from a Chapter 11 bankruptcy in late 2024 to a public warning of its potential demise in mid-2025 serves as a profound cautionary tale for the entire airline industry. The future for Spirit remains deeply uncertain. The company is exploring every last option, including selling off aircraft and valuable airport slots to desperately raise cash. With financial reserves dwindling by the day and massive debt payments looming, the runway is getting perilously short. The disappearance of Spirit Airlines would have major consequences for American travelers. Its absence would remove a key disruptive force that kept the Big Four honest, likely leading to higher fares across the board, especially for the budget travelers who can least afford it. It raises a bigger, more troubling question about the future of American skies. Can a true ultra-low-cost model even survive in a market so heavily dominated by a handful of powerful giants? The story of Spirit Airlines is a stark and powerful reminder that in the world of business, the very innovations that propel a company to the top can, under the right set of pressures, become the very reasons for its fall. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit the like button and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on Spirit's fate. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more deep dives into aviation and airline business stories.